In 1828, when the Cherokees gave up their reservation in Arkansas, most of them at that time relocated to the Indian Territory into northeast Oklahoma in Cherokee country where it is today. Just a few years later, the other Cherokees from back east started to come over. The first were the so-called removal party. These were the Cherokees who had signed the treaties giving up their land back east and agreeing to move to the Indian Territory and did so willingly. Most of the Cherokees, however, did not agree with the signing of those treaties and refused to leave in 1835 and stayed around for a couple more years, and it would be those Cherokees who would make up the Trail of Tears that we know today. The ones who stayed behind are sometimes referred to as the Ross Party or the Patriot Party, and they would come in larger numbers later on. So what you get by the late 1830s is you've basically got three different groups of Cherokees living in northeast Oklahoma. You've got the older western Cherokees, the ones who had been in Arkansas for years and years and had given up their land in 1828 and moved over there. You've got this small removal party group who had signed the treaties back east and had voluntarily moved. And then you've got the Trail of Tears Cherokees who are moved out in 1838 and 1839, and they're all scrunched together in this Cherokee territory, northeast Oklahoma, in what is really the Ozarks of Oklahoma. Much of this is. The hill country of Oklahoma is, for the most part, Cherokee country in Oklahoma today. But they end up there. You can see there were, when we talk about the Trail of Tears, there were actually lots of trails of tears. And there were lots of little offshoots of the trail. There were main trails, and then sometimes they took little different trails off of the main trails. And you can see just some of them, and two of them, or at least three of them, actually come right through the Ozarks. One of them here, right by Springfield. One through North Arkansas. This one into northwest Arkansas, and all of them eventually do because they end up in northeast Oklahoma in the geographic Ozarks. And what happens after they get to northeast Oklahoma is there's a few years of basically civil warfare amongst the Cherokees. The Cherokees who did not want to leave their land back east resent the ones who signed the treaties and took off earlier, and so you get bloodshed when they arrive, and the warfare continues into the mid-1840s before the Ross Party or the Patriot Party finally agrees to call an end to this and agrees, okay, you know, we're probably not going back east. We might as well just try to make the best of this and quit killing each other. But that was there was a long division within the Cherokee Nation over these divisions that dated all the way back to the 1830s and before. But that's a little bit about the native Ozarks, and we hurried through that because we talk a lot more about that in Ozarks history class than we do in here. But it's a background, and again, as I mentioned earlier, this is an era in Ozarks history where, you know, you might even not call it Ozarks history. It's an era when the Ozarks, as the Ozarks, whatever that brings to mind, hasn't really been formed just yet. And so we're sort of talking about things that happened in the geographic Ozarks. And we'll be doing the same thing with our next lesson when we talk about early European settlement in the region and in places that we know of as the Ozarks and that geographers call the Ozarks, even though they weren't really talking about the region as the Ozarks in those early days. But that's what we'll talk about next time, is we'll look at the French and we'll look at the Spanish era here west of the Mississippi, and we'll start to get into the early English settlement. Does anybody have any, or early Anglo English-speaking settlement in the region? Does anybody have any questions about our quick discussion of the native Ozarks? Anybody have any ancestors you know of who were on the Trail of Tears?
It went right down through Springfield.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
On the street at the fair, they had a map showing where it went.
Right. Yeah. There's been a lot of research in the last few years, groups trying to get a better idea of exactly where these trails went. And they've started marking them, you know, marking the trails. Yeah.
There are dead Indians all along too. They just got
Right. There are quite a few first-hand accounts that we get from old books and memoirs and stuff like that of people who lived in the Ozarks who saw them come through and interacted with them and stuff like that. And that is unfortunately the case, that death was a big part of the Trail of Tears, and that's, you know, where the Trail of Tears comes from, part of where it comes from. Yeah.